Lori Hacking had big plans. She was getting ready to move across the country with her husband, start a new life, and become a mom. Everything seemed perfect until one summer night in 2004 when everything changed. The next morning, Lori was gone. Her husband said she went out for an early morning jog and never came back. But something about that story didn't sit right. A missing woman, a clean apartment, a new mattress, and a husband whose story started to fall apart. What really happened that night inside their home? And why was Lori's perfect life suddenly gone? This is the true story of Lori Hacking, a woman full of hope, a marriage built on lies, and a disappearance that shocked everyone. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Lori Hacking was born on the last day of 1976 and adopted as an infant into a warm, faith-centered home. Her adoptive parents, Thelma and Geraldo Suarez, brought her into a life rooted in religion and culture, split between California and Brazil. Geraldo, a language teacher from Brazil, and Thelma, a fellow missionary he had met in Rio de Janeiro, raised Lori with strong moral values. But when Lori was just 12 years old, her life changed dramatically. Her parents divorced after Geraldo left the family for a much younger woman, an event that shattered their long-standing union and uprooted Lori's world. The following year, Lori and her mother relocated to Orem, Utah, a quieter town with deep Mormon values. Despite the upheaval, Lori adapted quickly. She excelled academically, formed close friendships, and took pride in her independence. At just 16, she was driving herself to school in a car her father gifted her and earning her own money at a local car wash. But even as she thrived, she couldn't shake the feeling of being different in a conservative town dominated by large traditional families. Everything changed when Lori met Mark Hacking. They were the same age, born just months apart in 1976. Their connection sparked during a school camping trip and slowly evolved into a relationship. Mark, the son of a respected pediatrician, came from a picture-perfect Mormon family with 7 children. He was outgoing, well-liked, and carried ambitions to follow in his father's footsteps to become a doctor. Lori, drawn to his charm and drive, found in Mark both a partner and a dream. Their early relationship had its turbulence. Mark, during his Mormon mission in Canada, strayed from his faith, engaging in behavior that led to an early and shameful return home. To cover up the scandal, he spun a lie, one of many to come. Back in Utah, he and Lori rekindled their romance with greater seriousness. At the time, Lori was pursuing a business and political science degree at Weber State University. Her academic drive was unmatched. She was focused, determined, and earned a scholarship to support her education. After a year, she successfully transferred to the University of Utah, her first-choice school. As their love deepened, Lori thrived. She received the President's Award for Academic Achievement and continued excelling in her studies. Mark enrolled at the same university in a pre-medical program, and their lives began to intertwine more closely. Friends described them as an ideal couple, devoted, affectionate, and always seen together. Mark often showed up with flowers and notes, making it clear that he adored her. In August 1999, the couple married, surrounded by family and friends. Lori had just finished her degree and soon landed a stable job at a bank. Mark, however, struggled to find a medical-related position that matched his aspirations. Eventually, he took a job as a medical assistant in a pediatric ward where he was praised for his warm demeanor and ability to connect with children. Yet behind the charm, Mark was feeling the pressure. His dreams of becoming a doctor were slipping away, limited by financial constraints and unmet expectations. Despite mounting challenges, Lori remained supportive. When Mark set his sights on attending medical school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, she encouraged him every step of the way. Her income sustained them, and her loyalty never wavered. In 2004, Mark received what appeared to be the break he'd been waiting for, an acceptance letter from UNC. Lori was ecstatic. They informed both families, gave notice at work, and prepared for their big move to North Carolina. Their future finally seemed secure. But what no one knew was that it was all a lie. There was no acceptance letter. There was no enrollment at UNC. Mark had never even applied. Summer 2004 was supposed to mark a turning point for Lori and Mark Hacking. With just a few weeks until their big move to North Carolina, the couple had no savings and no place to live, but they were full of hope. Then came unexpected news. Lori was pregnant. It was everything she dreamed of: family, motherhood, a future. The timing wasn't perfect, but they believed they could make it work. Soon after, Mark arrived home with a huge smile. He claimed he'd secured student financial aid and qualified for university housing. Rent would be cheaper, and for the first time in a long while, the pieces seemed to be falling into place. Mark was on track to become a doctor. Lori was expecting their first child. They were about to start a new life. But beneath the surface, something was off. Friends noticed Lori's excitement, but they also noticed that Mark had grown quiet, withdrawn. It wasn't like him. Still, major life changes can rattle anyone, and no one thought much of it. Then came July 19th, 2004. At exactly 10:49 a.m., Mark Hacking dialed 911. He reported his wife missing. According to his story, Lori had left the house around 6 a.m. for a jog, a routine she kept up even in the final weeks of their time in Utah. But this time, she didn't come home. She never showed up at work either. Lori was still employed, even though she'd given notice. She was known for her reliability, never late, never no-shows. For her to simply vanish without a word was unthinkable. Mark told police he had gone looking for her. He checked the trails she usually ran but found nothing. He insisted that under normal circumstances he might have waited before alerting authorities. But Lori was pregnant. That changed everything. Officers acted quickly. While some teams searched the trails and nearby parks, another group began what is routine in cases like this: investigating the spouse. Though their marriage appeared loving and stable, no possibility could be ruled out. Later that day, Lori's car was found parked at a local trailhead. It didn't appear out of place until detectives took a closer look. The car was unlocked and the keys were missing. That wasn't necessarily alarming. What was strange, however, was the position of the driver's seat. It was pushed so far back that Lori, who was petite, couldn't have reached the pedals. That small detail lingered in the minds of investigators. Witnesses at the park were questioned. One woman thought she saw Lori that morning. It was a brief spark of hope. quickly extinguished when the sighting turned out to be a mistake. Despite hours combing the area, there was no trace of Lori, no clothing, no phone, no signs of a struggle. By that evening, a specialized search team was formed to expand the effort. News of Lori's disappearance spread quickly. Mark appeared at a press conference, teary-eyed, pleading for help, thanking the public for their prayers and support. Cameras flashed as he urged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, two theories began to dominate the investigation. One, that Lori was the victim of a random act of violence during her morning run. Two, that someone close to her, possibly her husband, knew more than they were saying. Utah's wilderness provided a chilling possibility. With thick wooded areas and rugged terrain, it was easy for someone, or something, to disappear. Though no eyewitnesses reported seeing an abduction, police couldn't ignore another disturbing detail. 3 people had vanished in the area in recent months. As each day passed, the mystery surrounding Lori Hacking's disappearance grew darker. Detectives knew they had to explore every angle. Friends and family continued to paint a picture of the perfect couple. Mark was described as devastated, involved in the search, and eager to cooperate. But suspicion was beginning to creep in. One rumor suggested Lori might have run away. Maybe she'd chosen to leave behind her husband, her religion, and her life in Utah. But that theory quickly lost ground. Lori had left behind all her belongings, her phone, her wallet, her clothes. And those closest to her insisted she was excited for motherhood and fully committed to her future with Mark. She had been talking about baby names and moving to North Carolina. There was no indication she was planning a secret escape. When police searched the couple's apartment, Mark welcomed them in. He answered every question without resistance. But something felt off. The apartment was almost too clean. The bathroom, in particular, smelled strongly of bleach and other cleaners. Investigators also found packaging for a new mattress and bedding. That detail stood out. When questioned, Mark explained that Lori had stained the mattress due to her period, so he replaced it. A strange comment considering Lori was pregnant. While early pregnancy bleeding can happen, it's uncommon, and the timing felt suspicious. Detectives began checking Mark's records. What they found unraveled the story he'd been telling. At 10:23 a.m. on July 19th, the very morning he reported Lori missing, Mark had been shopping for a new mattress. That was just 26 minutes before he called 911. He had told police that he'd gone out searching for Lori immediately after she missed her return from her morning jog. But his bank statements told a different story. He never mentioned the shopping trip in his original statement. When pressed again, his answers became vague. He mentioned browsing different stores, saying he had been looking for a mattress around 9 a.m., that most places were closed, and he couldn't recall the store's name, only that it was next to an R.C. Willey. Investigators were growing more alarmed. Then, something unexpected happened. On July 20th, just one day after Lori's disappearance, Mark was found wandering the streets naked except for flip-flops. A concerned witness called emergency services. He was picked up by first responders and taken to a psychiatric hospital, claiming he was having a mental breakdown due to the stress of Lori's disappearance. But authorities weren't convinced. It appeared more like an attempt to avoid mounting scrutiny. The turning point came the following day when one of Lori's co-workers approached police. She recalled a troubling incident that had happened just 4 days before Lori vanished. On July 15th, Lori had received a phone call at work from the University of North Carolina. She had reached out to the university to inquire about student loans. Something in that call upset her deeply. When it ended, her coworker saw Lori visibly shaken, her eyes full of tears. Without explanation, she left the office early. That friend suspected something that hadn't occurred to anyone else. Mark had lied. He wasn't going to medical school. He'd never even been accepted. Detectives followed the lead and began investigating Mark's education history. The truth was staggering. Mark had never been accepted into UNC Chapel Hill's medical school. He hadn't even applied. Worse, he hadn't completed his undergraduate degree at the University of Utah, meaning he was never even eligible to apply to medical school in the first place. The entire story he told Lori, their families, and their friends was a complete fabrication. For years he'd maintained the lie, telling everyone he'd graduated in 1999, the same year Lori had completed her degree. When no diploma arrived, he claimed illness had kept him from attending the ceremony and that he'd collect it later. No one questioned him. He even walked around campus with a backpack, pretending to be a student. He visited Lori regularly, giving the appearance of a committed pre-med scholar. In reality, he was constructing a life on a foundation of deceit. And now, Lori, who had loved, trusted, and planned her life around that illusion, was missing. In the days following Lori's disappearance, pieces of the truth were starting to emerge, each one more disturbing than the last. Lori's mother remembered countless moments when Mark had asked for her help with essays, vented about physics exams, and insisted he was working hard toward medical school. It had all seemed so real. So how could it be that none of it was true? Lori's discovery of Mark's lies just 4 days before she vanished was no longer a theory. It was becoming an undeniable reality. The question was no longer if she knew, but what happened after she found out. Investigators, alarmed by the new revelations, returned to the hacking apartment for a second, more thorough search. This time, what they found left little doubt that a violent crime had occurred. Hidden beneath the pristine appearance of the flat were bloodstains, red speckles, splatter patterns in the bedroom. Inside a bedside drawer, police found a hunting knife bearing Lori's DNA. It now seemed obvious why Mark had replaced the mattress. The amount of blood suggested serious injury, possibly fatal. Compounding the evidence was the discovery of Lori's car keys inside the apartment. If Lori had truly gone jogging that morning, she would have taken them. Instead, it appeared that Mark had driven her car to the park, left it there to stage a disappearance, and quietly returned home. The mask was slipping. Despite the mounting evidence, Mark's family tried to defend him publicly. His father insisted that Mark hadn't hurt Lori, that his only crime was lying about school, driven by immense pressure to succeed. But detectives saw a different picture, a man attempting to fake emotional collapse as a potential legal shield. The fact that Mark hired a lawyer while still hospitalized only strengthened that suspicion. Surveillance footage emerged showing a man, resembling Mark, dragging a large, heavy object stuffed in a black garbage bag behind the hospital where he worked. He dumped it in a bin. Soon after, he went shopping for a mattress, and then made the 911 call. With the discovery of that footage, the investigation shifted toward the local landfill. Days of digging followed. Then came a major breakthrough. Inside the dump, investigators recovered a blood-stained mattress they believed to be the one Mark had thrown away. Alongside it, they found a handwritten letter from Lori. In it, she confronted Mark about his lies, expressed heartbreak, and said she wanted a divorce. That letter changed everything. In the eyes of the Mormon community, divorce is serious, often seen as a final, shameful step. Mark knew this. He also knew that once the truth was out, his carefully built life of illusion would collapse. Even members of Mark's family could no longer ignore the truth. One by one, his brothers visited him in the hospital, begging him to come clean. Eventually, under pressure, Mark confessed. He admitted he had killed Lori with a rifle in a sudden act of rage. He claimed it wasn't planned, just a moment of overwhelming emotion. Afterward, he cleaned the apartment, placed Lori's body in a trash bag, and discarded it in a dumpster behind his hospital. On August 2, 2004, Mark Hacking was arrested. Even with his confession, Lori's body remained missing. Search teams continued combing the landfill for weeks. Then, on October 1, 2004, her remains were finally found, decomposed, discarded, and broken. And yet, even with the truth exposed, Mark refused to fully accept responsibility. At his preliminary hearing on October 29, 2004, he entered a plea of not guilty. As the investigation closed in, Lori's family begged Mark to finally tell the truth and end their torment. For months, he remained silent, refusing to offer the closure they so desperately needed. But on April 15, 2005, that silence broke. Mark Hacking changed his plea to guilty. He admitted he had killed his wife. Under Utah law at the time, the court sentenced him to 6 years to life in prison. But in July 2005, the Utah State Parole Board made a public announcement. Mark would not be eligible for parole consideration until at least the year 2035. In effect, he would serve a minimum of 30 years before even being considered for release. The ruling bypassed the limitations of the law and reflected the severity of his actions. In response to the case, Utah lawmakers passed what became known as Lori's Law, an amendment requiring a 15-year minimum sentence before parole eligibility in first-degree murder cases. Her name became a symbol of legal reform, even as her family struggled to process the loss. At a press conference in Salt Lake City, Mark's father delivered a lengthy emotional statement on behalf of the family. With measured words, he tried to explain how everything had gone so terribly wrong. He spoke of Mark's failed mission in 1996, his return home filled with shame and physical pain, and a series of medical issues, including a concussion, seizures, and a broken back, that left him unable to focus in school. He described how his son, crippled by undiagnosed learning disabilities and a crushing fear of failure, began lying to cover his academic collapse. Mark pretended to attend classes, told everyone he had graduated, and even went as far as visiting medical schools to keep up the illusion. He lied to his family, his wife, and even himself. Mark told Lori that he had been accepted to 4 medical schools. They toured North Carolina, signed a lease, and gave up their jobs in Utah. But on July 18, 2004, Lori found out the truth. She confronted him. According to Mark's family, that was the night everything unraveled. On July 24th, Mark told his brothers the truth. The next day, Mark's lawyer contacted the district attorney with information about Lori's location. Mark had already resolved back in August to plead guilty. He never intended to let the case go to trial. Douglas went on to describe Mark as respectful, obedient, and free from vices like drugs or violence. He said Mark had always been a devoted husband and insisted they never heard him speak harshly about Lori. He claimed Mark was now tormented by what he had done and was willing to pay any price for it. Mark wrote letters to his family from prison, letters filled with sorrow and deep remorse. He expressed his anguish for what he had done to Thelma, Lori's mother, and the unbearable pain he caused her. Mark acknowledged that he might never understand why he killed Lori, but he wanted to change. He wanted, in his words, to become the man Lori always thought I was. Lori's family made one final change, a symbolic but powerful act of reclaiming her legacy. They removed the name Hacking from her headstone. In its place, they inscribed the Portuguese word Felina, little daughter. For Thelma, the choice was clear. We just felt that Mark obviously didn't want her anymore. Lori Hacking was just 27 years old. She had been excited to start a new chapter, become a mother, and build a life with the man she loved. But the man she trusted most had been living a double life. When that truth surfaced, he silenced her forever. Her death shattered not just a family, but an entire community who had believed in the storybook image of her marriage. In reality, Lori had been living with a man whose identity was built on lies. And when those lies could no longer be hidden, she paid with her life. Lori is remembered as kind, intelligent, and full of promise, a loving wife, a devoted daughter, a woman on the brink of everything she had ever hoped for. Though her life was stolen, her light endures, in the law that bears her name, and in the hearts of those who refuse to forget her. Her story is a haunting reminder. The greatest betrayals often come from the people we trust the most. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.